Carefully to your debate about whether the city committee can endorse a candidate, I think I have an objective criteria for you. You know, if they've had an august office like serving as majority whip of the Maine House, they can be endorsed. And since I served as majority whip of the Maine House, I humbly accept endorsement for governor of the state of Maine. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I want to talk to you first about what's been happening in the last week in this country and in the state. The President of the United States of America suppressed a report that was directed toward him with regard to a criminal investigation when he had earlier released propaganda to try to dissuade an investigation that was focused upon him. Within this last week, we had the governor of the state of Maine, under cover of night, send forces in to a rural part of Maine and take over a state facility without consulting any of the local officials, Democrat or Republican, or any of the local citizens, including people who lost their jobs, people who were transported away in the middle of the night. This is authoritarianism that we're seeing in the country and that we're seeing in this state. And unfortunately for us, we here in the state of Maine saw this kind of authoritarianism first. We had Trump at the state level before the country saw Trump at the national level, and we need to do something about it. And I'm going to tell you that what we need is bold leadership that changes the direction in this state. America will be looking to the state of Maine because we did have Trump before Trump, and they'll be looking for what is the national mood and where are we headed. And I'm going to submit to you that what we need is not timidity, but what we need is boldness in our actions and how we're going to nominate our candidate for governor and what that candidate is going to say that they're going to do. That if we sit back, if we say only, oh well, I'm not Paul LePage, that is not sufficient. It will not be sufficient to the people of Maine. We've got to offer something specific and bold, and we've got to have things that matter to average people. Because I think Democrats sometimes lose their way when they get spiraling off into highfalutin, arcane issues and don't talk about the meat and potatoes that average people in the state of Maine mean. Specifically, I want to put money into the pockets of Maine people. I'm going to demand as governor that we not only accept the vote of the people for an increased minimum wage, but we continue to increase it every year so that when my term as governor of the state of Maine is near completion, we will have a $15 an hour minimum wage, which will give people a decent living wage here in the state of Maine. That's what we need. I want to put money in the pockets of average people. Teachers. My parents were both teachers, and in this state I am outraged. Outraged by the fact that there are teachers making $31,000, $32,000 a year when they got a degree and are supposed to be teaching our most valuable resource. So I'm going to demand as governor of the state of Maine that we'll have a $40,000 a year minimum salary for teachers in the state, and it really should be more, but at least we'll make sure of that. And when I talk about getting things done, I mentioned I served as majority whip, I served as state senator, I served as mayor of the city of Bangor. When I talk about getting things done, it means I am determined to get them done. And let me give you an example. In the city of Bangor, I initiated a program called Energy Smart. This program, you know what it did? It helped the environment. And a lot of times people want to help the environment. I certainly want to help the environment. But I can tell you there's somewhat of a divide that I see sometimes between, let's say, the very coastal part of Maine and the inland part of Maine, and where the folks in the inland part of Maine and the areas in northern and eastern Maine where I come from, they kind of look down there at the coastal folks and say, well, you got your white wine and your brie. What about the rest of us? What's happening for us? And so I designed the Energy Smart program for Bangor in a very specific way. It gave people help so they could save money in their wallet with regard to energy efficiency measures in their home. Anybody could apply. You know, my constituents as mayor of Bangor include Stephen and Tabitha King, and they were eligible. They could spend 10 grand if they wanted to on solar panels on their roof, and that's wonderful, and it did help with that. But it was weighted so that it helped people with things like an energy audit and air sealing. So a person in Bangor, let's say a senior citizen on a fixed income who wants to stay living in their home, they could put $100 in and get an energy audit and air sealing that was worth about $650. And you know what that meant? That meant they could get that $100 back within the first energy year, and then it's all gravy every year after that. That could allow a senior citizen to stay in the home that they love longer over the course of their life, or help a young family do better. And I want to tell you how that program worked out. Efficiency Maine, at the end of the last fiscal year, what was their increase in homeowner participation statewide? Less than 1%. The participation rate in Bangor at the end of the last fiscal year was an increase of 54%. So when I say to you that I want to do stuff for working people that makes them money, it's because I've done it. Because I've gotten the job done. I want to do things that make a real difference for citizens. I'm going to push for Senator Troy Jackson's. There's been some controversy about that. That prescription drug generic bill, I'm going to fight for it. I'm not going to resist it. I'm going to fight for the average citizens so they can get lower cost prescription drugs and do what works for average people. Universal health care. We can talk about what they do on the federal level, and some say, oh, let's wait. Let's wait till they get some universal health care at the federal level. And I'll be glad when they do, but as far as I can tell, we're going to have to impeach our way down through the president, vice president, and all the rest of them for a long time before we get someone at the federal level that's actually going to support universal health care. So I am going to push for it as governor my first day. I'm going to slam that universal health care measure on the table. And do not tell me we can't get it done, because we can. I'll tell you how. In the nation of Iceland, they always say, oh, Maine's too small. The nation of Iceland has 1/3 the population of the state of Maine. They have universal health care. I recently read an article about a woman who moved from the United States of America to Iceland, and she was pregnant. She had some complications with her pregnancy. Here in the United States, it would be very expensive to deal with all of those costs that were related to her difficulties in her pregnancy. She said, yeah, she did have a bad cost that she was upset about. It was the cost when she came out of the hospital and had to pay a parking ticket because she was there longer than she expected. That was it. She got her health care covered, even though she faced complications. Every citizen has a right to that health care, and if they don't do it at the federal level, and I'm not going to waste my time waiting for them, I'm going to fight for it as a leader, as governor of the state of Maine, and make things happen. The citizens voted to end the prohibition of marijuana. I'm not going to fight the citizens. I'm going to work with the citizens. I have sons. I want education for them to know that substance abuse is wrong, but I'd say substance abuse is a problem with regard to alcohol, because they ended prohibition for that, and I'm glad they did, but people ought to know that there's some serious substance abuse issues when it comes to alcohol, and of course opiates. So we'll take that marijuana money, and we'll put it into education and the educational system in general, and we'll put it into education with regard to substance abuse. I'm not going to do what Trump did and talk about roads and bridges. I'm going to issue those bonds, so we're building roads and bridges and hiring people in inland Maine to build them so that we have a real infrastructure. I'm going to push for a $100 million bond for the internet in this state, so that if you live in rural Maine, you live up in Millinocket, places like that, you can have your business and you can have high-speed internet so you can hire people. Otherwise, if you don't have high-speed internet today, you've got trouble even having a business. I don't care if it's construction or even agriculture, you need high-speed internet. So we're going to make that happen here in the state of Maine. So when I talk about making things happen, I'm going to work to do it. When I served as state senator, I didn't talk about saving taxpayer money. I said, you know, they don't have a tough enough law with regard to people who are absent parents and not paying child support. So I pushed through a law that was dead in committee, and it saved millions to the taxpayers of the state of Maine, and it put food on the table for hungry children. I said, you know, I want to help businesses innovate. So I pushed through a research and development tax credit that cut taxes for businesses and made things better for them. I also think in this day and age, we've seen, especially the last 15 years, the problems with the opiate crisis. I think now is the time that we need to have a cabinet-level department for mental health and for substance abuse, and have someone who heads that department who has a lived experience with either mental health or substance abuse, so they have a leadership role at the table and can make a difference with regard to these issues. I'm going to make sure that when young people want to go to college, if they've got a 2.7 grade point average or above, that they will get a free first year if they want in a community college or at the University of Maine. They've been successful with this in places like Oregon. People at the higher income levels, they can pay a bit more, but if you're a moderate and low income person, you're going to get a chance to get a leg up. My father came from a poor family with a single mother, and they were dirt poor. And because of the GI Bill, my father was the first in our family ever to go to college, and it was because the government said, we're going to help get you a leg up from total poverty to raising your family up. And I'm going to fight for that for the state of Maine, because I don't see the federal government doing anywhere near as much as they should. Now, I heard something about Ben Chin here, less familiar in my neck of the woods than maybe I am in Bangor, where I served as mayor. But I heard about this mayor's race, and I heard about the Republicans sneaking around with internet attacks on this guy. And I don't view that as any better than what the Russians did, hacking into our country. We don't take that. We don't take that sitting down. We're going to stand up. And on my first day as governor, I will introduce legislation so that we will have a cyber investigator that looks for these kinds of crimes, and they are crimes because they should be reported as a finance expenditure, and that they were cheating. And we're going to find those people. We're going to expose them to the light of day before the election, not after the election. We're going to act on behalf of citizens. Because when I talked about the kind of corruption, the kind of authoritarianism that we see from Trump and from LePage, I'll tell you where it comes from. I'll tell you where it comes from. It comes from big money. Big money over the last 40 years taking control of our government. I'm a clean elections candidate for governor of the state of Maine, and I'm proud of it. Because all you need to do, the maximum you can give to my campaign is $100, and then you give $5 to the Clean Elections Fund. And that is a stand to get our citizens back in controlling the government of the state of Maine. I want to change the state. It is not enough for me to say, oh, when I was in the legislature, as Margaret knows, when I was in the legislature, I didn't just sit there and press red and green. I think if you look at my record, I fought for working people, and yes, I would press red and green the right way you'd expect as a Democrat. But I worked more than that. I said, let's come up with new ideas that are going to make a difference in people's lives. And if you look at my time in the legislature, if you look at my time as mayor, if you go to SeanFaircloth.com and type in Sean's results, I don't care whether it's economic justice or getting money in people's pockets or the environment or women's rights, I delivered. I delivered on my promises, and I said I'm going to get things done. I think we need a new vision for the state of Maine, an energetic vision and a bold vision. You know, I heard people say, well, old Bernie Sanders, he's some radical because of stuff that he said. And I say, yeah, you go on YouTube, you look up a speech from John F. Kennedy in 1962 when he talks about Medicare, and you change that accent, that patrician New England accent, to a New York Jewish accent, and it sounds just like Bernie Sanders. What has happened to this country when what Jack Kennedy said was absolutely mainstream because it was mainstream? And now we're being told that we're radical because we want to make sure that senior citizens get their health care, and that everybody gets their health care, that young people get an education. Jack Kennedy gave a speech 6 months before he died saying everybody should have a free education. He gave it at San Diego State in June 1963 with the father, Governor Brown, who welcomed him to the state of California. That's the direction we were heading in as a country, and now we are deteriorating and we need to fight back. And I guarantee you one thing, I know I'm not known as well in this part of the state as I am in others, but if you want a governor who's going to drive us forward, who's going to embolden people and take the bold path for this state and be a leader for the future, that people will say, this is our state and we're going to take back control of it, I'm your candidate. I will get you those progressive results, and I will tell you it is so important to me personally. When I was a little boy, my father picked me up on his shoulders, and I got to see a candidate for President of the United States. His name was Robert F. Kennedy. And in that room, there were people who were black people and brown people and white people out in this big giant field, actually, and they're all reaching out to this guy. And they believed in him. They believed in what he was saying. And I think that we need to have that same level of belief today, that we can change this state, this country, and this world. And it's not enough to say, I'm not Paul LePage. You have to say what you're going to offer. And if you look at what I have offered over the course of my career, I have been able to promise and get the result, the progressive result that changes things. So I will keep my commitment to you, and I will keep my commitment to this state, and I humbly ask your support. And yeah, I would like to have the endorsement of this committee because I believe in the future of this state and of this country. Thanks a lot, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.